I am not ready for this episode of 2.5 Men. That Darn Priest is the 16th and final episode of season 8 of 2.5 Men. It's directed by James Widdoes, and on its own, it is fine. As a season finale, it's pretty terrible, but I don't think it's their fault. I can't really explain too much about this without going into spoiler detail, just in case anybody hasn't seen what happens in the next episode or with the next season. I don't want to spoil it, but basically, as far as I understand, something happened that originally shortened the season a little bit, and then something else happened, kind of the bigger thing happened, that made them shorten the season again down to 16 episodes. And I'm guessing, unless this really is just a terribly executed finale, I'm guessing this wasn't their intended finale, and that's why it doesn't feel like a decent final episode. So on the one hand, I don't think it's a good end to season 8, but on the other, I can understand why that would be the case. And again, I can't really spoil that. I assume most people know what happens next, but I won't talk about that until the next episode. So there will be spoilers though for this episode as I discuss everything that happens in order. And interestingly, there was actually a note on the trivia section of IMDb that says this episode is the last to earn an IMDb rating above 7.0 for the rest of the series. I don't know if that's true still, because I don't know when that note was made. Ratings may have changed since then, but that's certainly very interesting. But that being said, I still don't think this is a great episode. I guess it's fine and something... Well, I guess we have some interesting things, and I'll talk about those now, so there will be spoilers from now as I go through everything chronologically. And we get a recap of the previous episode, and then Alan goes to confession, and he confesses his scheming, and we get some really good dialogue here. It then cuts to Charlie in bed with Rose. They're going to have a romantic weekend away, but Charlie has to leave quickly just now because Manny is allegedly coming home. Jake then catches Alan talking to his reflection, sort of, and then Alan tries to talk with Charlie about things, and it's clear that his conscience is getting to him with taking money from people. And before Alan can say anything, Charlie reveals that Rose heard about this. She's got quite a bit of money, so she wants in as well. More money for Alan. And the next thing we know, Alan is on the phone wearing sunglasses, eating popcorn. He's relaxing. He's talking to Rose, and he says to her, "Can you wire me the money today?" And she just appears in the room. I was going to say she bursts into the room, but that sounds a little too dramatic. She does just appear almost. And honestly, Rose often appears, but this for me was the most chilling. There was something about that was very, very sinister. And I don't know if it's just because with what she's been doing with Manny, she just seems more sinister now and more conniving and deceitful and untrustworthy. But that appearance was very, very well done. As she says, "I can give you the money right now." And actually, she quickly realizes what Alan has been doing, and he begins panicking. And he goes home, he's in the bathroom, he's panicking, particularly about Judith, which I have to say, yeah, seeing how Judith would react to finding out what he'd done would be fantastic. And then his mirror reflection reminds him that he has something on Rose, because he knows that Rose is cheating on her husband. Of course, we the viewer know that actually that's not true. Technically not true, at least. So it's a very tangled web here, and it does get certainly quite interesting. But also that's an interesting point. I didn't immediately pick up on that. I didn't realise that, yes, Rose could blackmail Alan. Alan can do the same. Not that I agree with it at all, but Mirror Alan made a very good point. Rose is then at home eating her dinner. It's actually quite a sad scene, because Manny's sitting next to her. She's eating dinner alone, which is absolutely fine, but it's the fact that she's faking it behind closed doors when there's nobody around to see. That's the bit that's almost too unsettling to be funny if you think too much about it. And Alan arrives at the door, and he said, "If you tell, I tell." And she's like, "Fine, go for it." But then he looks out on the deck where Manny is and says, "There's a bird on your husband's head." And that's when he realises that Manny is a mannequin. He goes to the deck, Rose is there, the game is up, and then Rose decides to write Alan a cheque for the amount he'd need to pay people back. And it's actually quite interestingly executed here, because I thought... it has been a while since I'd seen this episode, so I didn't know how it played out exactly. I think I mentioned that in the previous episode. And I assumed in that moment that he'd taken the cheque. And then he goes back home, and Berta's there and says that she needs her money back. I don't know if you're allowed to do that when you invest, if you can just ask for your money back, but either way, she needs it back. And Alan seems a bit panicky, which is strange if he's just taken the money from Rose. But then Alan's reflection in the toaster, I like how creative they're getting with this, tells him, or talks to him, and Alan confirms that he didn't take the money, which is certainly very interesting. And I think, and this is my reading of the situation, I think it shows that he cares more about Charlie than he does about the money, because he doesn't want Charlie to be feeling like he's having an affair with somebody who's fictitiously married to a mannequin. And I think that's a nice thing with Alan. Granted, everything he's doing just now is horrible, but the fact that he didn't take the money shows to me that he cares more about making sure Charlie knows the truth than he does being blackmailed by Rose. And Charlie and Rose are then getting ready to go on this time away together, and Rose asks him to go and get something for her from her closet. She doesn't really think about what she said, and Charlie goes upstairs, and Rose just is like, oh no. And of course, it seems like to the viewer, Charlie's going to find out the truth. He opens the closet door. There is Manny, and he does nothing. And actually, it doesn't seem that strange. He knows that Manny works in fashion. He designs clothing. I don't think it would be that strange for a clothes designer to have a mannequin. If I knew a clothes designer and I walked into their house and there was a mannequin, yeah, I wouldn't think that that's that strange. So I don't know if that was Charlie's thought, or if he was just so happy to be going away with Rose that he just wasn't thinking. Maybe a combination of the two, but I feel like that bit of a red herring there, where we're about to be given just this glorious moment of Charlie finding out the truth and then it just dropping off, I think was actually quite funny, more than irritating. Aside from the fact that this is the season finale, so it wasn't a satisfying ending. We actually end with Alan talking in the toaster, and it's not a great ending. It's not that great. As I said, I believe, I hope that this was never their intended finale, because it's just not good. It could, of course, be the case that this was their intended finale and the episodes they removed would have come before this, but it's not how it worked out, and I can't go into too much more detail than that. As I said, I wasn't ready for this. I knew this episode was in this season, but I'd completely forgotten that it was a much shorter season, and I've watched it and I'm still not ready for it. So the only thing that I'm looking forward to is that I've seen season 9 quite a few times. I think I've seen season 8 maybe 3 times, but after that I think I've only seen each season once. Maybe. Certainly the last season I've only seen once, so that means my memory of specifics isn't as great as it has been up until this point. And even then my memory hasn't been that great, so in a lot of ways, watching the next few seasons, or at least after season 9, it's going to be quite fresh, and I'm looking forward to that. I can maybe remember 5 or 6 key plot points from over the next few seasons, so I'm looking forward to that, but at the same time, I wasn't ready to get to this point, so that sucks. This episode, on its own, I guess is absolutely fine. There are some good moments. Alan finding out, absolutely fantastic, but yeah, as a season finale, I don't want this episode to exist in the way that it does, but ultimately, it's not actually a bad episode of 2.5 Men.